Opposites Attract by C.A. Wynn. We were lured to the surface of Leger by a lush green carpet of vegetation. Thermal scans documented animal life from orbit. We couldn't be certain of sentience, but primitive creatures were congregating in something resembling villages. This world was an explorer's wet dream. Maybe that's why we ignored all the other signs. "Lieutenant!" Rossini cried. She was a lieutenant herself and often preferred to stick with protocol. Lacking her military background, I was less inclined. It hadn't been more than a few minutes since I last looked in on her. Unlike the other survivors, she had been conscious most of our 3 days here. Alone with her broken leg, I could tell the pain and isolation were working on her. And her impatience was working on me. She called a few more times before I answered. "What?" My voice got louder than I'd intended. I knew I shouldn't have acted that way. I'm sure it didn't help her feel any better, but I'd tired of asking her to lower her voice. In the absence of medical care, the other 2 survivors needed rest and quiet. After several moments, I began to wonder if I'd hurt her feelings. "I think the ground moved," she finally said. I hadn't noticed anything, but that didn't make her wrong. "What did it feel like?" I asked. "The same as before," she said. "Maybe not quite as much." Rising from my seat, I followed the path I'd already worn to the gentlest rise. On Earth, most grass might have withstood several days of tramping. Here the ground cover seemed to die off with the first step. Unlike terran grass, this stuff grew at an extraordinary rate. Tramp it down one day and find a dozen centimeters of new growth the next. You could almost hear it sprouting. It might be what kept the local fauna coming back for more. After the crash, I was the only one who could move. That left it to me to scout out a shelter. With wide open grasslands as far as the eye could see, this hollow offered our best option. While they were few and far between, the grasslands were dotted with the odd tree or two. These provided only modest shade and little protection. What actually recommended them was the water I found beneath the nearest grove. The wildlife had yet to show any interest in where we'd settled. The gentle incline proved too steep for any of the larger animals to navigate. At the top of the hill, I searched the horizon in all directions. There was some dust stirring to the east. Following the ridge toward a higher point, I lifted my goggles in that direction. I'd forgotten again that the goggles were useless, as were other electronics. 3 days in, I was still thinking like I had all the modern conveniences. The planet had a hyper-resonant magnetosphere. That was the best explanation we had for why our equipment didn't work. When we descended, we found that the magnetosphere resulted in false readings and thruster glitches. Even when we switched to manual controls, we couldn't keep our shuttle up. If we hadn't descended over these vast grasslands, there's no telling what might have happened on approach. Rossini's piloting skills kept us alive. Well, most of us. At this distance, the herd resembled a moving horizon. It was the 4th or 5th host to come within view. They might all have been the same group. The numbers made it difficult to tell. From what I had observed, they were herbivores. I'd taken to calling them beefalo. With 6 legs, elongated faces, and a patchwork of fur-like covering, they resembled a child's drawing more than any creature I'd seen. Massive, taller than most Terran horses and wider than a hippo or rhino, they traveled in groups of hundreds or thousands. Their sheer size and numbers were intimidating, yet they had shown no aggression. I had gotten close to a few without much response. In fact, the creatures ignored me, even when I'd made physical contact. The few blood samples I'd acquired would have to wait until we could use our equipment again. "Are they close?" Lieutenant Rossini called. The bright morning sun illuminated her red hair. She was a few dozen meters off at the bottom of the hollow. Sound traveled farther in this atmosphere. Maybe it was the shape of the hills. The strange electromagnetic resonances couldn't be counted out either. "Not yet," I yelled to her. To the right of the lieutenant was our xenobiologist, Hyper-resonant, her head bandaged inexpertly. I made a mental note to change out those bandages, though our supply would soon run out. On the opposite side was our navigator. He was much worse off, with internal injuries I was ill-equipped to address. He would probably never wake up, much less recover. High clouds dotted the turquoise sky. Gentle rains had fallen twice since our arrival, and the temperature was mild. This planet's atmosphere was very accommodating, a honey that sweetened the trap. When I returned to our camp, I found the lieutenant sitting up. "You're staying off that leg," I said. "I want to see them," she said. "There will be time for that," I said. "We need your leg to heal, and there's no telling how poorly I said it." "We'll need food before that," she said. She was right. Our rations were modest. With 2 of our team members lost, the food could be stretched for a few more days. Had the shuttle not been trampled by one of the passing herds, we might have been able to go back for the rest. "Let me worry about that," I said. "Do you think they're edible?" she asked. Well, I knew what she was talking about. I wondered what other options we had. "Not sure how we'll dress or cook them," I told her. "Still nothing smaller?" she asked. I shook my head. "Haven't seen anything moving, but there has to be, doesn't there?" "If Hoa was awake, she could tell us," she said. I looked at the xenobiologist. "If she wakes up at all, that's a nasty bump on her head." "And no electronics," Rossini said. I frowned. The lieutenant looked around. "What about making me a crutch or a cane?" "It's not going to help if I order you to stay seated, is it?" I asked. It was Rossini's turn to frown. Since ours wasn't a military ship, she stuck to military protocol until it no longer served her needs. However, being the XO, I could always play the rank card. It wasn't something I pushed. That was thanks to the captain of the Sidonia. He understood the value of hierarchy, but he also knew that it couldn't beat emotional bonding. Life in distant galaxies was much easier when we all felt less alone. "I can't promise that bone will mend," I said as I rose. "I'll worry about that when we get off this rock," she said. I raised a hand. "You stay here, I'll look for something." What little remained of the shuttle offered few options. Rossini wasn't a large woman, but the strips of metal I'd secured were still too short. The closest stand of trees was just a few minutes' walk. It's where I'd found our water. The trees there looked like nothing I'd seen before, with gnarled limbs and bifurcated trunks folding back in on themselves. When I'd scouted out a long enough limb, I broke it to accommodate Rossini's height. The shape was barely straight enough to use. She leaned against it, unsteady on her feet. "Now I want to see the herd," she said. We worked our way slowly to the top of the shortest rise. The creatures moved south along the horizon. "And they won't come up here?" Rossini asked. "You'd think 6 legs would make them more stable, but that bulk," I said. "I watched a few of them attempt it. Well, I guess the herd forced them. Several of them fell over. They struggled to regain their feet. Not stable at all on the incline. I guess it's good the flatland is so vast." Rossini lifted her hand to shield her eyes from the sun. "Is that where we crashed?" "You can still see the smear, though the grass has mostly overtaken it," I said. "Smear?" she asked. I can only imagine what it looked like with thousands of those creatures bumping and trampling it. When I got back to it, it was like metal roadkill, pieces scattered across the grass, I said. "What about comms?" she asked. I didn't respond. By then, I'd answered that question a dozen times or more. "I guess they wouldn't work even if you had found any," she answered herself. "We'll find a way to communicate with the ship," I said, "but we have to focus on survival first." When I returned to the camp, I found that the navigator's breathing was shallow. His lack of consciousness was the best thing he had going for him. I tended to the xenobiologist's dressing. It might have been too early to ration bandages, but she showed more promise of a recovery. Rossini came up behind me. "Do you suppose they're sentient?" she asked. I screwed up my face. "The beasts? I doubt it. Why?" "I've had strange dreams," she said. "We're in a strange place," I said. So you're not having them? She asked. I was bone tired. Being the only mobile person, I felt the need to be on guard. I've barely slept, I said. She frowned. What if you set me up on the hill? In the heat of the day? I asked. I can't walk very well, but I could sit and monitor the herd, she said. That way you could get some sleep. There was a panel I'd rescued from the shuttle. It might give Rossini enough shade for a while. I couldn't afford to have her sitting in the sun all day. The water I'd found might last, or it might not. I agreed to bring it up the hill with her when I had finished tending to the bandage. That's the last I remember. Sleep came for me, despite my efforts. When I woke, the day had burned away. Lieutenant Rossini was nowhere to be found. The other 2 survivors were still asleep or dead. The navigator's shallow breathing made it difficult to be sure. When I returned to the rise, I found that Rossini hadn't waited for me. She'd shuffled along on her 2.5 legs, pulling materials together. Her makeshift shelter was empty. From the looks of it, she'd slept some in the shadow she'd created. Atop the highest point, I scanned in all directions. The herd had moved on. There was a patch of tall grass I'd yet to explore. It was west, nearly half a kilometer away. Rossini moved slowly through it, her red hair still catching the waning sunlight. I scrambled down the hill and across the open space. The grass had gotten up past my knees in this area. Through it ran a newly trodden path scratched out by my shipmate. Before I reached the tall grass, I encountered the smell of rotting flesh. I don't know how long ago I'd last smelled it, but this was different. It was sweeter than I remembered, without the familiar putrid bite. When I reached the pilot, she stood among 6 dead creatures. They were just like the ones we'd seen. She must have heard me approach because she greeted me with a smile, her arms held wide in display. They were slaughtered, she said. Slaughtered? By what? I asked. She nodded her head, her eyes filled with wonder. Not what, who? Small, thin objects protruded from the neck of the nearest beast. The one I pulled on was lodged well into the flesh. When I finally extracted it, I discovered it had a pointed end. Poison? I asked. My best guess, Rossini said. They don't look like they did enough damage otherwise. So we have to be aware of the threat, I said. Probably, Rossini said, shuffling over to me. Though it looks like they shoot exclusively at the neck, they know how to hunt these things. Scanning the carcass, I found that the hide had been sliced open in spots, with meat cut out. And specific organs? I asked. Do you suppose they eat them? She asked. Looking over the killing grounds, I found that each animal had been felled and dressed in the same way. There was a discernible progression of decay, as though these creatures had died 1 or 2 at a time. Could also be some sort of ritual, I said. When I looked up, I found Rossini leaning against her crutch. She smiled like a child who had just discovered Christmas morning. The grass around us grew tall, some of it well above our heads. They've been here for a while, I said, like the herd keeps its distance. Rossini looked around. Amazing, she said, her grin persistent. We should get back to the others, I said. Maybe we can rouse Hoa. Rossini responded with an awestruck nod. Her childlike wonder had begun to unsettle me. As we approached the closest hill, we heard a moaning. Hoa? Rossini asked. Her pace quickened. I'd heard the moaning myself, but it sounded too close. We were still several dozen meters from the hill, and it wasn't likely that the sound found us through the rise. Jogging ahead, I pulled out the small energy weapon I'd been carrying. It was comforting in my hand, even though it probably wouldn't work on this planet. At the top of the rise, I looked down on the encampment. There I spotted Hoa. She was leaning over the navigator, her hand resting atop her bandaged head. When I reached them, I found that the navigator had succumbed to his injuries. Hoa was crying over his body. What happened? She asked. With my arms around her shoulders, I guided her away. We crashed. You need rest, I said. When I'd gotten her seated, I examined her bandage. Behind her head, I saw Rossini clear the rise, her movements slow and labored. "Where's the shuttle?" Hoa asked. "Gone," I said. "Gone? How can that be?" Hoa asked. "There's animal life here," I said. "Large herds of massive creatures. I got what I could before they crushed the shuttle." "What the hell kind of animal life crushes a shuttle?" she snapped, then winced at her own volume. "Perfect. Just perfect," she said. "What kind?" I asked. "You tell me. You're supposed to be the expert." Her scowl slowly faded to a pout. By the time Rossini reached us, I was pulling out a new bandage. She pointed to the navigator. "Didn't make it?" she asked. Her awestruck wonder had melted into sadness. As I lowered Hoa to her makeshift bed, she wrapped her arms around her head and began moaning again. "Sorry," I said. "I'm sure it hurts. We lost the medic when we landed." "It's not a landing if you lose the medic," Rossini said. "You did the best you could," I said. Rossini waved me off. "She needs rest." "She's been asleep for days," I said. "Sleeping through a head injury isn't the best approach," she snapped. "She needs rest, not sleep." "Can you stay with her?" I asked. "I'll get more water before it's too dark." I hadn't gotten started soon enough. By the time I reached the trees, the sunlight was nearly spent. Cursing my poor planning, I retrieved the siphon hose from the underbrush. As I worked my way back to our camp, I heard a sound. Several, in fact. I'd call them grunts, deep, guttural noises that I might expect from primitive hunters on some pre-industrial world. The sounds were coming from the direction of our hollow. Crouched in the grass, I studied the several shapes silhouetted against the early evening sky. They weren't as large as the beefalo. It was difficult to make out distinct shapes, but their movements implied erectness. Their sizes ranged, with one much wider than the others. It was taller as well, but not the tallest. The small group of them moved between my shipmates and me, due west toward the tall grass of the killing field. I held my position until they'd gone far enough that I felt they wouldn't hear me. As soon as I moved, they stopped. Crouched again, I held my breath. After nearly a minute, I rose slowly and searched the waning light. Bright flashes of eyes in groups of 3 peered in my direction over the top of the grass. The 2 lower eyes of each creature pierced the night with a silver glare. Their third eyes, higher on the face, were larger, with an eerie flicker. My hand moved slowly toward my energy weapon. The metal was cool against my skin. My fingers found the snap, and I held them there, anticipating the noise it would make. Suddenly, the shapes moved off as though in a quick trot. I could still make out the silhouettes, though they had turned their eyes away. When I got back to camp, I related what I'd seen. "What's a beefalo?" asked Hoa. "That's what he calls the big animals," Rossini said. "Did you miss the part about them having 3 eyes?" I asked. "How many were there?" Rossini asked. 4 or 5, I said. "You can't tell if they were 4 or 5, she asked. "They were far off. It's dark," I said. "Did they say anything to you?" she asked. I thought she was joking. "I'm serious," she said, as though reading my mind. "Why would you expect them to talk to me?" I asked. "Because I heard them," she said. Her voice betrayed no jest, and the darkness made it difficult to see her face. "I didn't hear them. How could you?" I asked. The outline of her shaking head was barely visible. "I didn't hear them exactly. I heard something," she said. "What did it sound like?" Hoa asked. Rossini hesitated. "Hard to describe." "Voices? Movement?" I pressed. "Static," Rossini said without any certainty. "Static?" I asked. "How do you hear static?" "I thought that was just me," Hoa said. "You heard it too?" I asked. "I guess so," Hoa said. "Didn't you?" "How do you know it was them?" I asked. "Well, I didn't," Rossini said, "but now that I know Hoa heard it—" "Right," I said. "Okay, so we know we're not alone." Remember, something killed the beefalo, Rossini said. You'll need to catch me up, Hoa said. How about the two of you get to that, I said. I'll take the first watch. In my usual spot on the top of the nearest rise, I settled myself. It wasn't the highest point, but it was closest to the others. I could hear their whispers as I probed the darkness for our interlopers. Before long, Hoa and Rossini joined me on the hill. We all sat silent. After a few hours, I drowsed, leaving Rossini to the task. Sleep enveloped me again, as though it were an outside force I was powerless against. This time it came with nightmare landscapes where dark forms hummed a cold, electric song without shape. When I woke, Rossini and Hoa were gently snoring in the grass. The sky had begun to purple with the approaching sun. Rising, I stretched and looked around for any sign of life. Down in the hollow again, I pulled out the water bladder. That's when I noticed that our navigator was gone. He didn't walk off, Rossini said when I'd called to them. Even if he wasn't dead, I said. Oh, he was dead all right, Hoa interrupted. Even if he wasn't, I continued, he couldn't have walked away on his own. They were here? Rossini asked. Had to be, I said. That explains the dreams, she said. I narrowed my eyes. More dreams? Mostly the same, she said. Static, something I can't quite reach, dark shadows. I looked to Hoa. She nodded. The same. So we're all having the dream now, I said. That can't be a coincidence. Rossini nodded, the wonder returning to her eyes. You too, then. Where do you suppose they took him, I asked. The navigator? Rossini asked. We know they will leave a trail at least. The path they'd left wasn't as obvious as I'd hoped. What's more, our visitors appeared to have used the same route in as they did when they left. The trail heads toward that killing field, I told them. I'm going to follow it. Alone? Asked Rossini. I don't think that's a good idea. Right, Hoa said. We should stick together. Didn't you say there were 4 or 5 of them? I have a weapon, I said. So do I, Rossini said, but we know electronics are useless. Besides, we've already lost half of our team. Hoa grabbed Rossini's arm and pulled her closer. That's not your fault. I searched the pilot's eyes. You're probably right. We can take it slow, I said. We made our way through the grass, Rossini's leg our governor. The bright sun had begun to warm the air around us. Far off, another herd made its way across the vast plain. Where do you suppose they live? Rossini asked. The 3-eyed things? Out here somewhere, I said. Well, sure, but there isn't anything out here. No shelter, she said. None that we can see anyway, I said. Our scans indicated settlements, Hoa said. By now we know we can't trust the scans, Rossini said. True, but the heat maps showed congregations. That didn't mean above ground, Hoa said. When we neared the tall grass, the smell was noticeably worse. It had taken on the more familiar acrid characteristics of rotting flesh. Despite this, we were ill-prepared for the extent of the carcass's deterioration. Except for 2, the hides had collapsed, leaving bone exposed. The clean cuts we'd seen had all but disappeared into receding flesh. It's like there's something corrosive in the air, Rossini said. You say you visited just yesterday? Hoa asked, her hand covering her mouth and nose. These were freshly dead then, I said. The others had begun to deteriorate, but nothing like this. Do you suppose it's the same as the grass? Rossini asked. What about the grass? Hoa asked. Rossini grimaced. It grows like a weed. Fast, really fast. You can almost hear it, I added. Accelerated growth and decay? Hoa asked. What could cause that? The magnetosphere? I offered. If that's true, Rossini said, what's it doing to us? It didn't take us long to find the remains of the navigator. His body lay near the furthest edge of the area, within freshly trampled grass. The corpse was otherwise untouched. Does this make ritual more likely? Rossini asked. They didn't take anything out of him, I said. Is that because they don't understand what he is? She asked. Or where our organs are, I said. But they do understand death, Hoa said. I grabbed the navigator under his arms and dragged his body toward where I had buried the others. Hoa hung back with Rossini, their movements slow and deliberate. At the gravesite, I remembered that the metal I'd used to dig was in the tree grove. Stay here with the body, I said, as the others approached. I have to get the shovel. It was nearly a kilometer to the trees. As I walked, I noticed another herd approaching. This one was smaller, though moving much faster than the others. A cloud of dust rose behind them as they rumbled across the grassland. A slight tremor in the ground began to grow. They were definitely moving in our direction. I turned and ran toward the gravesite. Waving my arms, I shouted. Rossini's lean reminded me of her broken leg. There was no way we would be able to run fast enough to elude the approaching danger. Nor could I carry her to safety. What's wrong? Hoa asked. Despite the distance, her voice seemed so close, so immediate. A stampede, I shouted, spinning around and pointing. When my eyes had found the direction I'd come, there was no cloud of dust, no rumble of rampaging beasts. The urgency fell away, and I slowed. My mind raced through what I had seen or hadn't. Are you okay? Rossini asked when I finally arrived. My eyes were wide, my mouth hanging open. I swear I saw them. Rossini shook her head. Where are they? I have no idea, I gasped. Hoa reached her hand toward my forehead and wiped sweat from it. How much sleep have you been getting? He hasn't, Rossini said. I couldn't have imagined it, I insisted. They looked at each other. I didn't have to read their minds to know what they were thinking. I saw them, I said, sounding more desperate than I cared to. Hoa reached her arm around my back. You're under a lot of stress. What about the three-eyed visitors? Rossini asked. Do you think he imagined them too? Hoa asked. I didn't imagine them moving the navigator's body, I said. Hoa nodded. What if we do what we came here to do, then get back to the camp? We can try to figure things out there. With the navigator safely in the ground, we made our way to the tree grove to replenish our water. By then, the sun approached the horizon. We returned to the camp and ate. At this point, we have to assume the ship will not attempt a rescue, I said. Can't, Rossini corrected. Won't, can't. It's all the same to us, I said. We need weapons to protect ourselves. Protect ourselves? Hoa asked. From what? The three-eyed visitors, I said. Your stampede calls them into question, Rossini said. I frowned. But the navigator's body. And the slaughtered animals, Hoa added. Three eyes or not, they seem to be able to move around undetected, I said. Might have been here many times before I was lucky enough to see them. So they live nearby? Hoa asked. We have to assume, I said. Maybe underground? What about the tree grove? Rossini asked. You haven't seen any signs nearby, have you? If they're underground, they could be anywhere, I said. She's right, Hoa said. If they need water like us, they will congregate around it. The source of the water is the most likely direction for us to search. Okay, I said. What if we find these aliens, wherever they are? You mean besides the protocol? Hoa asked. Well, we can skip not revealing ourselves, Rossini said. They found us first. Not much point in pretending. We can still try to observe before we interact with them, Hoa said, and that brings us to non-threatening. I blew out a long breath. At this point, they are more of a threat to us than we are to them. That might be true, but I'm talking about restraint, Hoa said. How we approach is important. If they see us as the threat, we will be, whether we think so or not. As night approached, a light rain began to fall. None of us felt comfortable down in the hollow, and the rain forced our hand. We decided to move everything to the top of the ridge. When darkness finally came, we huddled together for warmth, the light rain tapping our meager shelter. The next morning, we worked our way to the grove. While I replenished our water supply, they began searching for signs of life. The siphon hose produced no water at first, forcing me to dig around. When I found a better placement, the water came at a trickle. "What exactly are we looking for?" Rossini asked. "Your guess is as good as mine," I said. "Some passage down? Why, what did you find?" "I'm not sure, but the ground is different here," she said. Looking around, I found I was alone. When I'd finally filled the bladder, I slid the hose beneath the ground cover and got to my feet. That's when I discovered just how far off the two of them had gotten. Rossini leaned against her crutch some 30 meters away. Hoa approached her from the south. Rossini reached out and grabbed Hoa's shoulder. With her other hand, she swung the crutch, striking the ground before them. "Sounds hollow," she said. Her voice sounded as if she stood just behind me, her breath warm on my ear. "How are you doing that?" I shouted. "Doing what?" Hoa asked, turning toward me. Her voice was just as clear. I shook my head. "What's the matter?" Rossini asked. "Don't you think it's odd that I can hear you?" I asked. They looked at each other, then to me. "You are kind of far off," Hoa said. "Exactly," I said. Rossini shrugged. "Something in the atmosphere?" "What if it's not sound?" Hoa asked. Even at this distance, it was clear that her lips didn't move. "Are you able to hear me?" I wondered. The two of them nodded slowly. "Any guess as to how we're doing this?" I thought. They both shook their heads. When I reached them, I could see what Rossini had found. It was a somewhat flat, dust-covered surface with subtle ridges and sinews. The grass grew shorter across it, but the pilot's banging had cleared a space in the center. We stared at the bare spot, motionless, for about a minute. When I looked up, both Rossini and Hoa did as well, as though we had choreographed our movements. "Should we talk about what just happened?" I finally asked. Rossini curled her lip. "What could cause that?" she asked. We both looked at Hoa. She backed away, her hands raised. "Don't ask me. Telepathy is not my area." "Don't we have enough problems without adding fantasy or magic?" Rossini asked, her voice rising to a shout. Hoa reached for her hand. "I don't know what it is, but we're in this together." I bit my lip. "Okay, let's try to focus on one thing at a time." On closer inspection, the ground didn't seem very different until I wiped away the dust. Beneath it was a wood of sorts, a tangled web of vine-like limbs similar to the nearby trees. Someone had crafted it into an uneven board, its sinews keeping it from being smooth and flat. "A trap door?" I asked. "Everything about this planet has been a trap so far," Rossini said. With my fingers beneath the wood, I lifted. The slab was heavier than I expected. When I'd finally gotten it to budge, we found it was a few meters wide by 1.5 meters deep. Its shape was as uneven as its surface. Beneath the board was a passage with stairs dug from the ground. The steps were uneven and deep, like they were made for very long feet. Each of these dropped nearly 1/2 meter to the next, descending into darkness. "I'm not going down there," Rossini said. I looked at her, then to Hoa. "You two stay here." "You can't go alone," Hoa said. "One of us should stay with her," I said. "I can take care of myself," Rossini insisted. "Not on that leg you can't," I said. Hoa raised her hands. "We have a concussion and a broken leg between us. We're not in fantastic shape for solo missions, but she'll be safer here than you will be down there. We go a short way together. The second anything feels off, we're back up here." "Just stay within earshot," Rossini said. "Earshot seems to be much farther on this world than anywhere else," I thought. Hoa nodded. "True," she said aloud. "That means we may be able to go deeper without losing contact." "Unless the ground dampens the effect," Rossini said. Swallowing hard, I moved toward the opening. Rossini reached for me, holding me momentarily still. "Not too deep," she said. The walls of the passageway were cool. The sunlight lit the way, though it quickly faded as I advanced. After several meters, I had to feel my way forward. The complete lack of light left me without any confidence in the steps. A few more meters, and I found the bottom. The walls were close. My fingers moved over them, probing our way forward. There was no sound except for Hoa advancing behind me. I'd progressed another 10 meters before I stopped and turned. I waited there until I felt Hoa's hand reach out. She patted my chest. "No light at all," she said. "Should we keep going?" "Maybe a little farther," I suggested. "I can still hear you," Rossini said. It was difficult to tell whether she actually said it or just thought it. I grabbed Hoa's hand and placed it on my shoulder. With my hands on the cool walls, I led her deeper into the darkness. A few meters on, light began to crowd my vision. I'm not sure how else to explain it. There was no light that I could actually see, but my mind was filled with a faint glow, a static of sorts. "Are you seeing that?" I asked. "It's like my dream," Hoa said. "I see it too," thought Rossini. "What do you think it is?" I asked. "The planet?" Rossini asked. "Or its inhabitants," Hoa said. We moved forward until we reached a wall. With my fingers, I explored each direction, discovering that the corridor forked. Hoa stayed close behind, her grip tightening on my shoulder. "Any suggestions?" I asked. "I think left," she said. "Are you seeing something in the static?" I asked. "Maybe," she said. "How about you, Rossini?" I asked. Rossini didn't respond. "Daria?" Hoa thought. There was still no response. Moving back through the darkness, I kept my left hand along the wall and my right tight around Hoa's. It took us several minutes to reach the stairs. I released Hoa's hand as I stumbled on the first step. When I recovered my footing, I bolted up into the brightness. The sunlight was blinding. As my eyes strained against it, I spotted Rossini's crutch unattended in the grass. A scan of the countryside found no sign of her. Hoa reached the top of the steps behind me, her breath heavy. "Not here?" she asked. I shook my head. Near the opening, I noticed trampled grass leading to where we'd left Rossini. They had approached from all directions. "Why didn't she see them?" I blurted. "They didn't take her past us," Hoa said. "So they have more than one way down," I said. The trampled grass didn't provide any clear direction. With Rossini's crutch, I started pounding the ground. Moving outward in a curving direction, I hoped to stumble on the entrance. By the time I stopped, I was several dozen meters from Hoa. She shielded her eyes with her hands. "Nothing?" she asked. Closing my eyes, I concentrated. "Rossini," I thought. "They might be able to block us somehow," Hoa said. "You can hear me," I said. "Yes, but I'm here. Wherever they took her," she said. I returned to pounding the ground with the crutch. We worked that way for several hours, moving outward from the underground entrance. By then, the day neared its end. Hoa became alarmed. Looking up, I found she was staring at something. In the distance was a single tree about a half a kilometer away. Near it was a figure, gray, erect, unmoving. Before I could react, Hoa shot past me. Pulling the crutch closer, I started after her. My legs swept through the knee-high grass as I raced past her. Nearing the creature, I could make out underdeveloped, arm-like limbs jutting from its sides. What appeared to be its head came to a point at the top of its frame. The creature was not tall in human terms. Before it lay the reclining form of Lieutenant Rossini. She still had that awestruck grin on her face that had unnerved me the day before. When I'd come within a dozen meters, I slowed. "They don't want to hurt us," she said. "They have a funny way of showing it," I said. Hoa came up behind me, just as winded as I was. "You spoke to them?" she asked. "I'm not sure they have a language," Rossini said. "They communicate at a much more intimate level, like being in their mind with them." "Then how do you know?" I started. "You'll understand," she interrupted. The creature's 3 eyes seemed to be looking at me, though I didn't see anything behind them. "They can't see us," Rossini said. "Not with their eyes, at least." Hoa walked past me to approach Rossini. She stared at the creature. What are their eyes for, then? Leftovers, I think. Like their arms, Rossini said. Vestigial? Hoa asked. That's the word, Rossini said. Fascinating, Hoa said. Where did they take you? I asked. Underground, I think. It was dark, but I could see, Rossini said. In the dark? I asked. It's like this telepathy we've been experiencing, Rossini said. I think they live their whole lives sensing the world with their minds. But how could you? I asked. All I can tell you is I could see in the dark, she said. Hoa had gotten to within a meter of the creature. It did not respond to her approach. What do they want? She asked. I don't think they want anything, Rossini said. Not from us, anyway. Why did they grab you, then? I asked. Rossini scrunched up her face. To help me see better? She asked. I shrugged. I don't know what that means. I wish I could explain it better, she said. What I can tell you is that they don't mean us any harm. She turned toward Hoa. It wants to connect with you. What's stopping it? I asked. It's their way. They ask before they enter your mind, Rossini said. I thought you said they didn't have language, I said. They don't, she said. Her smile broadened as her eyes slowly closed. It's a feeling. You'll see. It wasn't long before both Hoa and I understood exactly what she meant. The first time our hosts opened their minds to us, the static refined into something vivid and coherent. It was a living vision of their world. The Legerese, the name we eventually gave them, weren't a separate people. They were part of the planet, and it was part of them. It was less that they adopted us than that the world itself had claimed us. That was several months ago. Time has less meaning here, so it's difficult to tell how long ago it was. I couldn't tell you if the Cydonia ever attempted a rescue. It no longer matters to any of us. If you choose to come, know that this will be the only place you will ever want to be. Here, the grass grows so fast that you can hear it, if you know how to listen. End of Opposites Attract by C.A.Wynn.